Okay, so did you all need me to read these minutes out loud? Is that what you determined?
That'd probably be the most efficient way to do it.
Okay. Donald, you're killing me.
I know, sorry.
We just want to hear
They're
your
not
voice.
very many.
They're brief.
Yeah. Okay, the meeting was held on February 19th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. Ashley Ritchie called the public forum to order at 5:30 p.m. See, I can't even say them. 4 speakers from the public. At 5:50 p.m., the public forum was adjourned. Christy Bush made the motion. Amanda Terry seconded. Ashley Ritchie called the meeting to order at 5:51 p.m. Quorum was present at the meeting. Brenda Sykes made the motion to approve minutes from the previous meeting, and Christy Bush seconded. Randy Brookshire presented. Remington presented. Next meeting, March 23rd, 2020. Meeting was adjourned by Ashley Ritchie. Christy Bush made the motion, and Amanda Terry seconded. And Christy Bush she just joined. Never mind, she found it.
Okay.
Okay.
Just need to ask for approval.
So, but I have not even called this meeting to order, so I guess we need to officially call this meeting to order at 5:40 p.m.
Got it.
Okay.
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 Get approval of minutes.
Now, with that being said, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 19th, 2020 meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Amanda Terry.
Mandatory.
Better write that down, Jess.
Mandatory.
Get a second.
I hear a dog. Is
The
that a second?
Dog seconded.
dog's like,
Fine.
Yeah, no, my dog doesn't count.
Fido seconded.
Who was that?
that's that. Okay, this is what I'm looking
Who seconded that?
I'll second it, Donald Stump.
Okay, Donald second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm assuming it passed. Unless anybody opposed, you can unmute and oppose right now. Okay. So now we turn it over to, who am I turning it over to, Donald? Randy Brookshire.
Randy Brookshire. Ross Teron, architect.
All right, good evening, everybody. Since it's been a while since we met, I thought I would go through a little bit of a brief synopsis of some of the information that had been shared previously. First of all, I hope everybody can see the screen. I think we're cameraing the large screen here at the board office. So I'm going to go through this Word document, and again, I pulled some information together. If you all recall, this is the 4th LPC meeting. So meeting number 1 was the very generic KDE orientation. Meeting number 2 was very much more specific to the district, and we covered some of the following items, including the funding sources. Ross Sinclair covered this specifically, the fiscal agent for the district. The bonding capacity, which I understand has changed since that meeting. It's increased since that meeting, so that's a good thing. And I pulled some of the pieces of information out of that presentation, not to cover the entire meeting. One of the things we talked about was the cost of delivery of services. This is basically broken down by school, and then the number of students and the cost per each student as far as delivery of that education. And that's on an annual basis. We also talked about the history of student enrollment within the district, which basically the synopsis of that is it's down 4% over the last 30 years and had a peak of 5,651 students in 07-08. And the last report was the 5,241, which was 2019. Another piece of information that we covered was the demographics of the general population within Clark County. The snapshot of that is the expectation over the next 20 years from 2020 to 2040 is that the general population will remain flat, while the population greater than 65 will increase by 36%, and the working population will decrease by 8%. So the implications are there that the working population are the parents of future students. So that is indicating that that's going to decrease. And this all comes from the University of Louisville demographics and provided by KDE. A little bit about student population. So again, the anticipation over the next 20 years from 2020 to 2040 is that the student population within the county will decrease by 5%. That's the information that was presented. I think that was shared in a digital format, so you all have it, and I think it was handed out as a hard copy at the meeting. So LPC meeting number 3, which you just approved meeting minutes for, which was dated February the 19th. That's where Remington and I presented an architect and engineer assessment and report. So we went through each individual facility and basically provided a snapshot of the conditions of that facility based on the physical condition of the facility, as far as the finishes, the structure itself, the systems within that building, and also the program deficiencies based on the KDE model program, comparing that facility to what KDE says that you should have for that facility based on the student population. And here's an example of that, and it kind of transitions into 2 of our important conversations tonight, because what we walked out of the last meeting was a general conversation about how to move forward with the Phoenix Academy and the preschool. Those were 2 big topics of conversation, and so there's been some information put together that's been shared, and I've got that here tonight as well, and we'll go through that. So we put together a report that looked like this for each of those facilities. This happens to be the one for the Phoenix Academy that again shows the conditions of each of the different systems and shows the program deficiencies over in the lower right-hand corner as far as comparing that program against the KDE model program. So as I mentioned, so if we were to take that and just convert that into the DFP format, the District Facility Plan format right now, this is kind of what it would look like here on the lower portion of the screen. So it would describe the renovations of that facility and then the program deficiencies as far as renovating existing space or adding to that facility. But again, some of the conversation was what exactly to do with the Phoenix Academy if you were not going to keep it at its current location. So we basically put together 4 different scenarios of how that might be accommodated. So the first scenario was renovation of space at the Campbell Junior High School. And basically this was specifically focused in on H-wing, let me zoom in here a little bit, and taking that space and renovating that space into the Phoenix Academy. So there's some modifications required for that. That's, the space is there itself as a total, but it needs to be re-subdivided, some of these partition walls demolished to create the appropriate spaces for that. So that was an estimate, very rough estimate of $829,000 to do that renovation at Campbell Junior High. Another idea that had been floated was to take space at the current GRC school, high school. And this is specifically one of the 4 pods that was associated with the Freshman Academy, so one of the V's, if you will, of the Freshman Academy, which it just so happens fits pretty nicely with the required program for the Phoenix Academy as far as the classroom and administrative functions, with the assumption that shared spaces, media center, computer lab, multi-purpose type space, gymnasium, would be used with the rest of the facility. So that was a fairly minimal investment as far as securing that space, doing some minor renovations within some of those spaces to accommodate the Phoenix program there at the high school. Now, I'll preface that conversation by saying I'm not sure exactly how that impacts some of the current spaces that are currently being used. I know there's capacity at the high school based on student population. So I did not go there and physically investigate how that space is currently being used. So please don't crucify me based on that. But that was an investment of $175,000, so a fairly economical solution to accommodate. And then the other two scenarios that we looked at were actually new construction versus renovation. So item C there is to build an addition or a building could be physically attached, does not necessarily have to be physically attached to the existing high school, but just to accommodate the program spaces of the classrooms, the resource room, the administrative area, and with the assumption again that the Phoenix Academy would use the common spaces of the gymnasium, kitchen, cafeteria, multi-purpose space. And that was $1.8 million to construct that. And that number is based on KDE's cost per square foot for new construction. And then the item D was to build a brand new Phoenix Academy, freestanding, self-reliant, so it had everything built into it. It could be built literally anywhere that the district might have property or wanted to acquire property for. So that included, all the classrooms, programmatic spaces, but it also included media center, kitchen, multi-purpose space, and the administrative area. So it's basically, again, a self-sufficient, self-reliant building. And again, based on KDE's cost per square foot for new construction, that would be $3.375, almost $3.4 million. So those are the four options that we had looked at from a cost perspective. And then the next thing we're going to get into is the preschool. But before we move into the preschool, I think it may be worthwhile to just discuss if there's any questions or comments about the Phoenix Academy, those four options, or if there's any other options that someone wants to explore or at least discuss.
There at Campbell, the space, I'm trying to make it out on the map there. That space that you're talking about in H-wing is at the bottom center there, the white, is that the office space?
Yes, that is the, this
So
this
you're
actually
talking
green
using
is
space
the,
directly down the hallway in front of the
Yes.
office space.
yeah, so the green here is the gymnasium.
Okay, I got you.
This is the H-wing. It used to have the computer lab and like the
Right.
business classrooms over there. That was just mentioned as a possibility, and it just so happens that square footage works out pretty nicely to accommodate that as far as the classrooms and the administrative area. And again, with the assumption that those students would be utilizing the common spaces at Campbell for kitchen, cafeteria, gymnasium, media center, library, that type of thing.
Just a point of clarification, when we're considering renovating space in two existing facilities, in this case Campbell and GRC, is that based on the assumption that those two schools are pretty significantly under-enrolled when it comes to student enrollment in those buildings as been assessed by KDE?
Yes, so let me scroll down here a little bit. The assumption is, and the numbers say this, is that GRC is underpopulated based on capacity, and Campbell is underpopulated based on capacity. So, so these are the numbers. The enrollment. This is the current the SAR reports, Superintendent Attendance Report, Donald, that you shared based on this last spring semester. The enrollment at GRC was 1,522. And based on capacity, based on the number of classrooms that are in that facility, you could accommodate 2,064 students at GRC. And then at Campbell, which we all know is oversized because it used to be the high school, and now it's only got the 2 grades in it versus the 4 grades. It's 895 was the current enrollment, and then the capacity was calculated at 1,501. So, Campbell is 60% occupied and GRC is 74% occupied.
I'm sorry. Did I miss the RDC wing price for renovating that?
That is the Campbell renovation is $829,504 roughly, just based on renovating that square footage.
GRC is 175, 495.
And the difference there is that it's anticipated that the renovation at Campbell is going to be more intensive. There's going to be more demolition and right-sizing those spaces, whereas at GRC, you've pretty much got the 4 classrooms that you need, plus the others, the kind of this corner classroom, which is a larger classroom for resource room and administrative functions. The GRC space is actually well suited already to accommodate the Phoenix Academy, so it would require minimal renovations, whereas Campbell would require some more intensive renovations.
Was there any consideration looking at, on the opposite side of the gym, down that hallway, down by the cafeteria, down that wing? That's where your cursor is, down that side there.
I know where you're talking about. That was not looked at specifically. I know you're talking about like the old shops, the wood shop, and going down toward the ag classroom and stuff. That was not looked at specifically, but you know, based on the size of those spaces, I think it would still be in the same range as far as dollars go, just because, you know, you're taking those larger spaces and having to create the right size spaces for the classrooms.
For me personally, as a preference, if you were looking to do that, I would prefer to see it over on that other side, that further isolates them away from the general population of the 7th and 8th grade students. And I just know with the current security door systems, how that could be closed, that could be an area closed off, and could make them a little bit more segregated from the general population.
Well, you've even got that rear door, I guess, back there that you could kind of designate that as.
And down there, there's a side entrance over the cafeteria, so
Right.
there's 2 entrances
Right.
that could become, and for the parent, that back loop is the parent drop-off, so there could even be a drop-off and a parent drop-off for an entrance to the back side of that. And with those fire doors where they're located, you could completely close that section off to other population in the building, and still have access to the cafeteria and to the gym and to the greenhouse, which would be right directly outside.
Yep. That was not looked at, but I would imagine it'd be in the same ballpark as far as cost goes, just knowing those spaces and knowing the building itself. But there should be plenty of space there to do that, absolutely.
And help me remember, for what reason did we not consider pricing the renovation of the current facility?
Well, the renovation of the current facility would be this, basically. So this is the repair renovation cost of 2.1, and to address the program deficiencies would be 1.8, so a total of 4 if you were to renovate and either renovate the physical building and spaces within that building, or add to that building to provide these spaces.
Which is more than a new building at the high school or not?
It would be just based on the square footage.
That's the most
Yes.
expensive option.
Yes. So that's
I
still
know
on
it's
the
just
table
my
as
2
an option.
cents, but I just can't imagine spending $4 million on a building that we know is on its last leg.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's it's built in 1974. Not necessarily built of institutional level quality. Just it's got kind of the thin interior partition. So, but that would be that cost for that.
Yeah, that's just not reasonable.
This is Mike Murray, and I'm a teacher at Phoenix. I think the RDC, any numbers there, we still have some of the same issues we do now about trying to transport kids all day long to the high school for vocational classes. So to me, that's not one of the better options. But then just a question, because currently we have 6 teachers in classrooms, and so dropping down to 4 would seem to possibly put us into some issues with DJJ regs with basically capping class sizes at 10 if we're looking at a facility for 50 or more.
Okay. I think KDE uses a different number than 10 to calculate the capacity of the classes.
They do.
I think it's 15 or something. It's
DJJ is 15 with an aide and a teacher, 10 with just one teacher. No
okay.
aide.
So for the purposes of this, I identified the 4 classrooms based on the 15.
Right. So that would be a capacity of
60.
60.
Mhm.
In that corner that you're looking at there, that orange, is that to be designated to be office administrative?
Well, so this is just literally a snip of the existing high school, and it wasn't intended to be color-coded,
Oh,
except
okay,
these are
okay.
classrooms, and then that's that science classroom that's a little
That
bit
is-
larger.
Yeah, that
Yes.
is a classroom.
It is a
There
classroom.
5 classrooms.
It's a larger than normal classroom, but you could imagine if you kept with the 4 classrooms with 15 in each, you would have the 4 standard classrooms, and then this could be subdivided into a resource room and some administrative functions.
And the expectation is that kids in that facility would also be participating in gymnasium, other programs that exist.
Yeah,
In the high school.
they would be utilizing the gymnasium, they would be utilizing the cafeteria kitchen, they would be utilizing the media center library, I assume. And, you know, obviously they would have access to the area technology center if they were potentially taking any of those classes. You know, this specifically, and again, it's just a snip out of the existing floor plan. So this dark blue area is actually the current ag program, and so to the left of this, it wasn't on this plan, but that's the area technology center wing that kind of was connected to that continues around that corridor. Are there any other questions about I guess there's 5 options. There's leave it in the existing location and renovate or add to. There's renovate space at RDC. There's renovate space at George Rogers Clark. Or there's build new. And build new means building partial so that it could utilize space at GRC, common space, or a brand new facility that would be self-reliant, and literally it could be anywhere that that the board wanted it to be.
I think for students that are GRC students and they must get those credits, I can't imagine Ellen having to transport all the time. I mean, to me, it seems like we would be transporting every hour on the hour to GRC if we did the renovation at RDC.
That's what they're doing now, right?
Yeah, this past year, we had a bus that we had a driver we contracted with, sitting at Phoenix. Now they do have a Suburban, not a new, they have a Suburban that's going to be used for transporting students hourly back and forth to the school. So they have a transportation piece, and they're not dependent upon a bus driver coming out there and putting 2 or 3 kids on a bus and driving to the high school and bringing 2 or 3 back. They'll have a vehicle now that's for their use to transport kids vocationally back and forth, and also for community service.
Paul, is it too late in this facility if we do vote and we chose something at GRC? Could we use RDC wing as the Phoenix Light area
That's a
for
possibility,
the
yeah.
younger ones, or are we too late in the process?
No, I think if your Phoenix stays where it is, or it goes somewhere besides at RDC, then that space at RDC is still there to be used for something else. And some of those classrooms that are there could quite easily be turned into what we're looking for a Phoenix Light or whatever we're going to call it. That could quite easily, at not near the expense that you're looking at here to do that, with minimal expense to do that.
And
for the number of kids we're talking about, 8 kids.
That's
10
that's
kids.
basically
One room, yeah.
one classroom.
And acknowledge as well as that this has to be approved by KDE, and I think Tim accurately demonstrated to us in a previous meeting that KDE is very hesitant to approve new construction when you have such capacity in buildings, or under capacity in buildings. In this case, at GRC and Campbell, we're so under enrolled, it's going to be difficult to get an approval through KDE, and you guys can reflect on this, to build a new facility for more kids when we have that capacity in those two buildings.
I think that would certainly come up as a question from KDE and a comment. I think KDE would strongly, they might not say require, but I think they would strongly suggest that you look at your existing facilities to accommodate that program based on the fact that you have capacity in those facilities.
That's always been my understanding as well.
And they would not approve that you renovate the old existing building. I can guarantee you that too. So you're really down to two options.
Okay. And those two options being what?
Well,
Campbell and GRC?
renovating existing space. If you kind of rule out we're not building new and we're renovating, you're renovating space at Campbell, regardless of where it is in the building, whether it's H-wing or, that's like S-wing over there, right, or something?
The H-wing is what they call that whole
Would the
square.
1.8 million adding a wing on to GRC, is that considered new construction if
Yes.
it's adjacent, an add-on?
It would be, yes.
Don't laugh, but when you have too many cooks in a kitchen, I just think that, that would be two head principals under the same roof. And I think adding a wing on to the existing, that would service the kids wonderful, and I think it would be less issues, in my opinion.
You have two principals in the building right now.
You're talking about the high school and the ATC, right?
No, but that's still a separate door and separate wing.
And so is the ATC.
I'd kind of like to look at this more holistically, so I'd like to hear this more information about the next steps in order to really get into the details of solutions for each one.
Well, so, yeah, I'll jump ahead to that. So this group, the LPC's responsibility is to identify kind of the big picture of where things are going with regards to each facility. Not necessarily, whether it's, for instance, whether we're renovating space or adding space to something. Not necessarily, like, for instance, let's take Campbell. We don't necessarily have to be specific in our description of renovating space in Campbell, which space that is. We might want to leave it more flexible to actually allow some future conversations if that was the decision about which is the best space to actually renovate. Because there will be future conversations. The LPC is providing the kind of the big picture idea of where this is going, and then the board obviously has a role to play in that, and KDE has a role to play as far as providing oversight and input. In general, and I'll jump ahead to the final format of what the DFP is going to look like. This is actually the format of the DFP. I don't know why that's so large at the top. But anyway, so it gets converted into an Excel file that KDE reviews. And this is the format. It looks very technical. I think you all had a copy in your all's binder of the current DFP actually. So this is the final format of what that gets put into, so it gets submitted to KDE. And again, it's based on, it's broken down into different priorities, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which again we'll get into here shortly. But that is the general, and then, so one more thing to add on to this, and we're going to cover this at the end, but we'll cover it now, is based on this meeting, we're hopeful that we can put together a draft DFP that looks like that Excel file that I just had open, so that we can share that with the group here, get a general consensus that it is on target and accurate based on our conversations tonight. And then the next step would actually be to send that to KDE to get KDE's review and comments back. And then this group would meet again to consider KDE's comments, potentially incorporate those comments into the DFP before it gets voted on, approved, and then the next step would be that it goes to the board. So I don't know if that answered your question fully or not, but I guess if you have additional questions, please speak up. Okay, if not, before we move on, I would like to get some general direction of where this group would like to see us go with regards to the Phoenix Academy so that we can incorporate the correct description and put it in the right priority category.
I think what I'm saying is before we can go on a particular direction with Phoenix, we must consider the other elements within the district, such as the preschool. So I think I'd like to, I think it makes more sense to hear all about that before we pick a particular direction, because these two things go together.
Okay, well then, let's move on to the preschool, shall we? Is that okay? Okay, so kind of want to walk through the same thing with the preschool. So this was the assessment that was done at the preschool. It has some significant issues. You see by the number of elements that were identified as poor condition from the original 1957 construction. And then you see that cost for addressing those. And then you also see, this is the continuation of that. Oh, I pulled the same thing. I goofed up here. The second slide should have been the 2000 edition and identified the program deficiencies, which I think I have here. Yeah, sorry, let me switch screens here. So the second slide would have been this one, which evaluated the 2000 edition and also identified the program deficiencies. And basically it identified a lot of deficiencies because most of the classrooms that you all have at the preschool would not be considered preschool classrooms because they are either lacking in size or they lack the inboard toilet facilities to classify those as preschool classrooms. So that's why you see a large number of classrooms that are shown as program deficiencies. But basically, to construct that new or renovate, that's, excuse me, sorry to jump around, would be in the range of 5. To address the existing conditions would be in the range of 2. So to address the preschool at its current location, you would be in the range of $7.4 million to address that. So let me jump back here. And if I were to take that and convert that directly into what that would look like on the DFP, this is kind of what that would look like as far as identifying the renovations and then identifying the program deficiencies within the existing building. So the last time we talked, we were looking at a new preschool facility on either the site next to Concrete or the site adjacent behind Stroge Station. I actually went and walked through both of those sites, and I don't think it makes much of a difference with regards to cost to either one of those sites. They each have their kind of advantages, disadvantages, but the important thing was we were asked to look at a 350 student preschool, a 450 student preschool, and then a 600 student preschool. And so again, just taking those program elements and utilizing the KDE cost for new construction, a new 350 student preschool facility would cost $9.5 million. Hopefully y'all can see that here. A 450 student element or preschool facility Again, you're mostly adding classrooms to that facility. There's some minor adjustments that happen in some of the other support areas, but that would basically be an $11.5 million project. And then jumping to a 600 student preschool facility, again, we're mostly adding classrooms. Some of the common spaces like the multi-purpose room, the media center, and the administrative areas also increase based on the KDE model program, but that would be a $14.5 million project cost. So those are the three options that we were asked to look at with regards to a preschool facility. I guess 4 if you considered keeping the preschool at the existing Hannah McClure, but I definitely got a strong sense that that was not a desirable approach, just based on the limitations of the existing facility, how much renovation it would take to address that facility, and the fact that that facility is not ADA accessible because of the ramp that connects those various wings, and to make it ADA accessible would be pretty costly and challenging. So, questions about the preschool options?
These prices for new construction, those include land purchase or not?
Those do not include site acquisition, no. The assumption that KDE makes when they publish their cost per square foot to identify the project cost assumes that the district already owns the property. A site acquisition would be a separate cost. And so again, in this instance, we were looking at the site adjacent to Concrete where the old, whatever plant that was, I can't even remember the name that was associated that you all tore down, or the piece of property that you all own directly behind Strode Station.
Now, these prices were pre-pandemic
Yes.
quotes. Is there any effect of the pandemic that would lead you to believe that they might come in lower than what you're anticipating for new construction or not? Or is that pretty much a pie in the sky question?
Well, it's kind of a pie in the sky question. These are definitely pre-pandemic. These are 2019. They have not published their 2020 prices. KDE has not. But I will tell you, and I know we should not make any plans or put any hopes in this, but I will tell you that projects, because of pandemic and because the contractors are hungry and concerned that they might not have future work, we have seen projects come in below cost estimates, below that price recently. Now, when are you going to build and bid this project? When could that be? It could be a year from now, let's say. Who knows what the bidding climate might be at that point in time. I don't have a crystal ball that allows me to foresee that future. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be doing this job.
So bringing up the COVID-19, are we really sure we want to jump in with both feet and we don't even know what enrollment's going to look like? Are we required to make decisions now just because it's our 4-year cycle?
You can always go back and amend a DFP during that 4-year cycle, and there's a process for doing that, which basically brings this group, the LPC, back together if there was a desire to amend the DFP at some point because of student population change or there's a kind of a list of different things that could prompt you to do an amendment to your DFP.
Based on
How many students do we currently have in the preschool? Last year we served just over 300. The average was 306 throughout the year. So 350 would allow for 2 additional classes to what we had last year.
And I'll add a comment to that, I think this would just be prudent. is that if you built it for 350, we may want to consider the possibility of accommodating future addition if there was a growth at that facility, so we could build, let's say, 4 more classrooms, so allow some space on the site to do that. There's a way and technique that we could set up the building to fairly easily do an addition that would increase that capacity at some point in the future if that was needed.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's Randy speaking. I think that's a great idea, Randy, and I'm glad you bring that up because it's something that the district would want to consider if they ever want to move toward a universal 4 program or something like that. So I think having that flexibility, like 350 would serve the needs for now, but then that extra flexibility would allow us to have some good long-term planning.
Kara, what is your enrollment looking like for this year with everything that's going on?
So right now I have around 98 children returning and I have 180 applicants now. So we're in the process of screening all of those applicants. Not everybody in that 180 obviously is going to qualify, but if, we will be very similar numbers to last year. What you're having, the pressure on the market right now is that, the childcare industry has constricted due to COVID. And so there's even more demand for early childhood education opportunities.
But you haven't got your guidance in for preschool yet to know if you're going to be as strict as that. Is that still true, or did you get something in?
As strict as what?
As the daycare?
Oh, no, we won't. No, there's no guidance that says that we'll have to have smaller classroom sizes, if that's what you're asking. No, for all I'm getting from the state is that we will not have to abide by the smaller numbers in the classroom. So it should be the same for us. The specific guidance for preschool hasn't come out yet, but it doesn't change the number of kids that we have to serve, right? Does that make sense?
So they won't make you do the 6 foot apart or any of that? You won't have to do that?
It's a little bit different for early childhood. Right now, the language that we're hearing is that it looks more like a group of kids come together and they're considered like a pod. And you don't want those classrooms mingling with other classrooms. You don't want a lot of you don't want any cross mingling. But once that class comes, you can't do 6 feet apart with 3 and 4-year-olds. It's not developmentally appropriate. Does that make sense? Like they have to have physical touch and for their development, for their social emotional development.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that.
That is interesting.
Sorry, Christy, I think I talked over you. I think she was in the process.
So are there any other questions about the information that's been put together? Any suggestions on how to move forward with the preschool?
I just wonder if we waited another month to reconvene and discuss this again with our enrollment, so we know what we're facing. Is there any issues with KDE and not being in compliance with our facility plan?
Well, we haven't asked them that yet. I mean, if you're asking if we can ask KDE for a waiver, certainly we can. But at this point, we've gotten no direction as to any adjusted timeline or expected timeline for when our facility plan is due, which is in August. That's why we're meeting virtually today, in order to comply with that August deadline for our facility plan. We have not gotten a waiver. Of course, we haven't asked for one, but we haven't gotten one. My understanding is it's still due in August.
That's right.
Is that something that we can ask for until we get the surveys and everything back from what preschool's going to do and the surveys we just sent out?
You haven't sent a survey to preschool. You have not asked any preschool parents for survey information, so you won't have any survey information for preschoolers.
Right, because
to be
yesterday
honest,
you said you're going to do something different.
no,
You and
because
Dawn were talking about something different in the survey, but I'm just saying, I think we need to know who's coming back and the sheer numbers of who's coming back.
Right, so like I said, preschool is repopulating every year, and we have 180 applicants as of today, not saying they want virtual, saying they want to come to preschool. And that doesn't even include all the ones that we get in August. So I really think like the enrollment numbers are gonna impact your K-12 more than they're gonna impact preschool as far as a potential reduction. I don't see that, like with Phoenix, I don't see it reducing their population because that's, more DJJ mandated population. And preschool, it's kind of like your two outliers that are included in this, not so much your main K-12 where people may decide to stay home, if that makes sense.
If I could interject just a minute, the expectation of your district facility plan is a 4-year plan. And you have a deadline to submit this to KDE. Every district has a deadline to submit a new plan to them every 4 years. By implementing a plan, that does not mean you must initiate construction immediately for whatever decisions that you make. You have up to 2 years to address a #1 priority on a district facility plan. You're not locked into starting tomorrow digging dirt. This is a 4-year plan with a 2-year plan being initiated on your level 1 priorities. That's why districts go ahead and implement their plan, then their board decides at what point they want to begin any project that's listed on this plan. So I don't see any purpose or any recommendation to delay the design and implementation of this plan based on COVID. It makes no sense to me.
I would have to agree with Donald. This is Carrie Curtis. I would have to agree with Donald that we need to plan for our community now and not for the potential of what could be because of COVID. It seems that we have numbers that we have to address currently, and those numbers need to be looked at, and we need to plan for them as soon as possible so that we're not behind the ball when we're looking at what we need to do for our community.
This is Brenda Sipes. I am hearing what everybody's saying, but I want to put a little comment about preschool. In the past, we've had as many as almost 340 students, and we had people begging to be enrolled in our preschool. And I don't see that changing anytime in the near future, and I think the 350 is a great start with a long-range plan of getting to 450, because even though our community seems to be not as active as far as young children, we're always going to have lots of young people here with little kids that we're going to need to have community access in our community for those families. And so I think preschool has just got to be at the forefront of anything we do.
This is Paul Christie. I want to add one thing. We talked about earlier, Mr. Brookshire talked about this being the numbers that he was using for the stats coming out of the Census Bureau out of Louisville. They had us showing us that a decline this year, and we were actually, our enrollment increased this year. Overall enrollment increased in our district this year. Now, that was pre-COVID. We'll see what happens, but so the numbers, from the, those are, of course, they'll be updated. Now, those numbers are probably we're getting close to 10 years old, and now they're doing the new census, so they're going to get updated. So those numbers could change.
Correct.
But we did show an increase in enrollment district-wide like this past school year, at the onset of the school year, even though it was showing us that we should be decreasing. So the census is just one set of numbers.
That's right.
But we do still have a lot of capacity currently in our elementary schools.
I'm not against doing anything with preschool, and I've said that in many meetings, board and here. But my thing is we kind of skipped over Phoenix. I got knocked out and came back in, and we were on preschool. And I think that's something that we are going to have to address, because
Skip over Phoenix.
it is affecting, and at one time, Paul, you and I have discussed, expanding Phoenix into elementary and everything like that. If that's something we're going to go into, we're still gonna have to address the Phoenix Academy as well as the preschool.
And we still have ongoing plans of looking at at increasing, going to what we were calling Phoenix Junior or Phoenix Light for our earlier, younger aged kids, and some issues that we're experiencing in elementary. So we're still looking at that and still planning toward that. Now, we're not talking huge numbers or anything at this point, but it's a start, and that I can see that.
We're still gonna have to address the building situation with
Yes,
Phoenix transportation. That's still gonna have to be in this plan somewhere.
Yes.
We can't just skip it and go straight. I mean, I'm fine with building a new preschool, but we still have got to address the Phoenix situation in this plan as well.
I think
Yeah,
that's a good
intend on it.
statement.
Yeah.
I would agree with
It's
that.
gonna be on there.
And Ashley, we just moved forward to talk about preschool with the request that we talk about kind of the holistically, the projects holistically, with these kind of being the top two identified needs and priorities that could be considered. We didn't necessarily skip over it, we just kind of moved to talk about the preschool in the same conversation to talk about the Phoenix Academy.
Okay, well, like I said, I got kicked off for a minute, and when I came back in a minute's time, we had switched from Phoenix. So I didn't even know what happened to Phoenix, so I was coming back to it.
I agree with Ashley. I think we've got to consider both of those things in tandem. I think they kind of inform each other, right? Like looking at Phoenix lets you know how much, we know how much money we have, and we're looking at both of those priorities and try to balance those, and it's important to look at them both holistically together.
Well, your bonding capacity will continue to increase.
Yeah. And it increases about $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Our bonding and potential at current situation, it increases about $1 million each year. Each year, you're going to gain another $1 million in bonding potential.
Do they know you're the one now?
And in case some, I think the last meeting that we talked about this, when we had Ross Sinclair in, the paperwork that they gave us that showed us that night that we were at about 8 million. Well, since that, we've had an update from them, and as of the end of this month that we're in right now, we're now at a little over 11 million. So we're a little better off than probably we thought we were the 3 months ago or 4 months ago when we had this report. And with everything that's happened and the way that it's come down, Ross Sinclair, of course, Joe Nance has retired, but the good thing about Ross Sinclair over the years that they've been very conservative with their figures. And now that they are comfortable in telling us at this point that we are at or above 11 million in contingency right now. Or not in contingency, I'm sorry, in bonding potential. So that was good news. That's good news.
With respect to facilities, I think I need to weigh in here a moment just to give folks a clear understanding of where we are currently assessed with regard to the needs of our facilities. If you look at Hannah McClure Elementary, that school has previously been designated by KDE as a transitional school early on in the previous plan, which means we convert that school to an auctionable school and do away with it. Back when we did away with Trapp, Pilot View, Providence, that Hannah McClure was designated by KDE as a transitional school. The expectation was not to use that for any long-term capacity to educate children. So, and as such, we have not invested much money at all over the course of the last 5 or 6 years in that building. We currently have a boiler that's heating that building that is 57 years old, a whole boiler water radiator system in that building that is 57 years old. There is no air conditioning in that building, in the hallways, in the gymnasium, cafeteria. They have window air conditioners in the classrooms. The roof is in horrible shape. Soon, I mean very soon, we either are going to have to vacate that building or ask our Board of Education to fund a new roof on that building. We recently quoted an HVAC system in McClure that approached close to $500,000. When we sell that building at some point in the future, we will be fortunate to get $150,000 out of it. We got $57,000 out of Trapp, $220,000 out of Providence, and $150,000 out of Fannie Bush. We cannot feasibly continue to invest money in that building with the expectation of getting any of that money back at some point in the future when we do have to leave that building because it was built in 1957. So if we don't do something soon to that building, I will guarantee you, I will be going to the board soon to ask them for hundreds of thousands of dollars in HVAC and roofing expenditures to address that and bring that building back into compliance. And even when we do, it's still not going to be ADA compliant, as Mr. Brookshire has conveyed to us. I mean, we are short of being in crisis in educating children in that building. There's not a restrooms facilities that are in there that's sufficient. The floor is caving in and the foundation is sinking. We're educating kids in mobile units outside and probably need to add 2 more mobile units out there again. That building is in crisis. We have to do something with that building soon. But I'm agreeing with the conversations
Like
with...
we also said at the board meeting as well, is that Phoenix doesn't have HVAC either. When we were looking into the 2 schools that did not have it on the requirement list.
I mean, you're talking about the air handling, the fresh air handling.
Yes.
Well, Phoenix has about 20 heat pumps on the top of their roof, which is in a sense an air handler for each building, for each unit. So you are getting fresh air into that building, but it's not like Simcoe units or the air handling units that we have on our other buildings. But you do have about 20 heat pumps on top of your roof that is circulating air and providing cool air throughout that building for the students that are enrolled there. Preschool does not have that. There is no air conditioning there. You know, and if we're talking about facilities here, what are your priorities in your district for investing in facilities, not necessarily expanding programs? So, you know, I'm a very strong supporter of our day treatment program. I was the one that wrote the grant for that. I mean, I'm a very strong supporter of a daycare, but I mean a day treatment. But there's
Preschool.
There's a number of options available to address both of these facilities, I think, given our capacity, and that's kind of the conversation I'd like to see us go in.
Well, when you talk about different possibilities with preschool, there's really only 2. There's no way you could spend $7.7 million on a building that is on its last leg. So your only other choice is to build another facility. So there's no other avenues, is there?
I don't have any other options. You know, like you said, I don't think it would be wise to suggest that you're going to invest a whole lot of money in Hannah McClure just because of the existing conditions that are somewhat unsurmountable, especially the ADA. I'm not even sure how you address ADA and make that compliant without some significant rework. So I don't think it's wise to invest a whole lot of money into that existing facility, except to continue to limp along as long as you need to, but with emergencies. So that leaves building a new facility. I don't think the district has any other facilities that can accommodate that number of students within your all's current building stock that I'm aware of.
You probably mentioned, and I had to step out for a second, you may have mentioned while I was gone, that when it comes to renovation of an existing structure, KDE will not approve renovation of an existing structure if it exceeds a certain amount,
80%.
Percentage of the cost of what it would cost to
Yeah.
build new. I'm sorry, you may have mentioned that.
I did not mention that, but that's a really good point. KDE will not allow you to list renovating an existing facility if it's going to cost, if that cost is 80% of building a new facility. They say you should just go ahead and invest that additional 20% and gain a new facility, as opposed to putting money in an existing facility. So to answer your question in short, I don't think there's another option to address preschool except building new. So I think the question there might be, you know, how many students do we need to build it for initially? And then, you know, we can actually put some language in the LPC to say initial construction to accommodate 350 students with the consideration of providing, you know, the land and the thought that you could easily connect additional classrooms to increase that capacity to 450. And I'm just throwing out numbers, I don't
So,
know.
so a new preschool at 350 is 9.5.
Yep, that's right.
Adding an addition onto GRC is 1.8. Is that correct?
If you did it as an addition for the Phoenix Academy, correct, that is this option right here at 1.8 to
So
accommodate.
1.8 and 9.5 is 10, 11.3, right?
Correct.
We have 11 or some change in bonding capacity. Could we not reasonably do both of those options?
Well, even if you didn't start them both at the same time, this is a 4-year plan.
You're gonna gain.
If both are listed as the number one priority, then the board has the option of choosing which one.
Right.
Yeah.
But reasonably, it's within 11
Yeah,
million
well,
to do both of
but
those.
the time you would commit to build, let's just say, throw it out there that you built a preschool. The time that you would commit to building a preschool and you would get the plan in place, start construction, enough of a time is going to turn, you're going to increase your bonding potential by $1 to $2 more million
Right.
before you start to pour any concrete in the ground.
And if we found that the construction costs were very attractive in the very near future, we can essentially do both.
He said they were.
Oh,
Yeah, we're
Do both
seeing
within a reasonable amount of time, and we could do both.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the question for,
Oh, Dustin.
I think we've got to do what's best for both programs, and I like just building them both. I was the principal at Phoenix. I like the idea of having my building, their own building, the built-in programming to fit it, like carpentry or HVAC, or it's right there on campus. I think we got enough money just to do both. It's what's best for kids, and kids turn us down, but we've got to do what's best for kids.
As a facilities director, I couldn't be more thrilled to get rid of Phoenix building and build a new preschool would be a best case scenario for me.
I would be great with that.
I'll chime in too. I also worked at Phoenix for a little while when I worked at the high school, and I agree. I mean, I think you know the totally well together, Phoenix and the preschool. I think preschool is your early intervention to really close the gap from an early age and provide wraparound care for children and families. And Phoenix picks that ball up, you know, for kiddos later. And I think when I look at the numbers, it seems really obvious to me that we can definitely do both, build a new preschool and build an addition or something like that, build a standalone place at GRC or whatever as well for Phoenix. I think really getting a vision in our community for ensuring that every single child in Clark County has an opportunity to succeed from an early age is critical.
Are there any repercussions in any way if RDC states what KDE considers under enrollment?
We have some explaining to do, probably.
well, yeah, I think I think you're going to get a comment back of your underutilized facilities. And if you looked at RDC just by itself as a middle school, junior high, KD's certainly not going to let you do any addition to existing RDC to address any program deficiencies. They're going to expect you to renovate the space that you've already got within the building. But it's understood. It's like, you know, you've got an old high school that served 4 grades, and that's now been converted into a junior high that serves 2 grades. So there's definitely the capacity at that facility, but KDE's not going to say, oh, you need to tear down a certain amount of square footage to make that line up. I mean, you've got the square footage, you know, and I'm sure it just allows for a lot of flexibility.
It also, that's what I was saying, that allows for some flexibility in that we could be looking at in the near future. Your elementaries, and Donald mentioned, but the elementaries are a little bit closer to, are much more close to capacity when compared to the high school and Campbell. In fact, you got one of your elementaries out there that's 100% capacity right now. And then you're 82, well, you got one that's under capacity. And I'm not sure about that one. But you look at the others, they're in the 80s and the 90s. So there's some things that could possibly be considered in some redistricting that could help fill junior Campbell a little bit. You could be looking at a reconfiguration of say a K3 in your elementaries, maybe something like a 4 or 5 in your Baker, your intermediate, and then go to your junior and go to your Campbell could be a 6, 7, 8 building. Therefore, you bring the capacity up of Campbell and you create a little more capacity or a little more room in your elementary schools, which could give us some more room. We know that we redistricted 7 years ago, and we know that our district lines have gotten muddled in the last 7 years, and this could give some room to fix some of that. So there are some things that you could do that we could make an argument with KD that we're taking into consideration to talk about that would allow them to have to maybe feel better about giving us go ahead with a facility plan that called for 2 new constructions.
So based on what you just said, is that something we need to look further into or not?
Well, I don't know that this group is the one that looks at the redistricting. That's a board decision. That's a conversation for the board. But in any comment that might come back from KDE on a facility plan about Campbell being underutilized, that's the time when we start to have the conversation now. But we've had some beginning conversations. We're getting close to possibly needing to look at redistricting again because of our elementaries. You can see they're getting from 68% to 100%. So we got some issues there. So I think that's the time you start to talk about what if we do something different there. How could we reconfigure to better utilize Campbell? I'm in the same camp as most of you. I'm an old vocational teacher, and I'm sitting in the room with a lot of preschool teachers and preschool people. So for me to see Phoenix and knowing with the requirements that's placed on those kids to graduate and the need to be somewhat attached to a vocational school or to some vocational programming and their community service work, I think something that puts them closer to the high school, that gives them access to a vocational school that is a little bit underutilized as it is at the high school right now, I think would be a good thing for those kids. As just as good for those kids as a new facility for preschool kids would be for them. And I think that's looking at both ends of the spectrum and taking care of 2 groups of people.
My only thought process at this point would be if KD is going to have an issue with us. They're going to have an issue with us. We're proposing to build new construction when we're under enrolled at Campbell and GRC. I mean that's going to be a given. They're going to have an issue if we make that a number 1 priority. If it's a number 2 priority, they may not have an issue with how that's presented to them. If preschool is a number 1 priority with Phoenix being a number 2 priority, they may not have a concern with that. Once you make Phoenix a number 1 priority and you're talking about new construction, that's when it'll wave the red flag, in my opinion.
And I agree it might be, but I'm willing to take that flag and wave it right back because having them at Campbell doesn't solve the problem that you've got with that group of kids. That's not what's best for them academically. And
that's your argument.
That's the argument that we have there. That's not what's best for them. Having them closer to that high school and being able to utilize that vocational program, it's a requirement for them to have that.
Yeah, but you have the GRC option to where they can be either inside or an addition.
Yeah.
My only point is if you propose an addition,
the smaller addition is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. That's all they can do is say no, right? I mean, if we send it that way, that's all they can do is say no.
I think this group ought to list it the way that this group feels like they should. It should be listed, and KDE will make the comment that KDE wants to make, and we can make the best argument, put our best foot forward.
I propose that we roll the dice and submit it that way and see how they respond.
As Paul is well aware, I mean, he's certainly gone up to the
I've been there
Kentucky
before.
Board of
I'll go
Education
again.
to make an argument of why it's listed the way that it is, and this is the best for the district.
Both number 1s.
Both number 1s with the Phoenix Academy being an addition.
Yeah.
As opposed to a renovation inside, and just see how KDE responds to it.
Okay, so looking at the smaller addition for the Phoenix Academy to accommodate their core curriculum as far as the classroom spaces, you still utilizing the common spaces within GRC. And
It'll be
then,
option C, right?
yeah, option C here. This option right here. And then for the preschool, building a new facility. And I mean, what I'm hearing and what I'm going to suggest seems appropriate is you're building initially for 350 students, but with the thought and the planning to be able to easily accommodate an increase to 450 students. Does that sound appropriate?
At some point in the future.
That's built into the design of the building where in near future you could come back and add additional classrooms.
Because you'll
To
see
increase the capacity.
the common spaces based on the KD model program don't change between the 350 students versus the 450 students, except for a small increase in the administrative area, which is probably one additional office, I assume. And then the biggest difference, the most difference is in the classrooms, the number of classrooms. And the difference would be 5 classrooms to jump from 350 to 450. So, you know, we could easily plan for an addition of 5 classrooms on the end of a wing or something like that, however that layout looks like. And
That addition for Phoenix on GRC, how many classrooms did you design?
it's 4 classrooms. And again, that's for assuming the 15 students per classroom.
That was for the addition?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Let me have, I'll tell you just.
Can I say something, Mr. Snip? Can I say something about Phoenix?
Go ahead.
I just got,
Yeah, go ahead.
Phoenix, and Mike can correct me here if I'm wrong, the Phoenix, I mean, 4 classrooms for Phoenix, and it's pretty small. Putting 15 Phoenix kids in a classroom is probably, some days, not a real good idea. I think if we put it in GRC, you're very limiting the size of Phoenix, I think. And I think, talking to a lot of principals, there's a need to expand it. I think we would limit that if we keep it inside GRC. I do think they need their own facility, whether it's attached to GRC or wherever it's at. I don't think that really matters, but I think they need a place to call their own. We already work fairly well with Phoenix. We bus kids back and forth to the ATC and for some to take some ag classes at GRC. We've already got that relationship in place with Phoenix, and yeah, it works fairly well. I don't really want to see that go away anytime soon. So I do think it's a good idea for them to have a facility, whether it's attached to GRC or not. As far as the preschool goes, I don't see any option that's really fiscally responsible other than building a new one. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like
Mr. Snell on that one.
So it sounds like we're going to list 2 projects under priority 1, and that's going to be the preschool and the Phoenix Academy. And it does not, as long as they're listed under priority 1, it doesn't matter which one's first. That doesn't come into play. And we're listing the Phoenix Academy as an addition or some kind of building, new construction on the campus at GRC that would be potentially physically connected, or maybe it's a covered canopy. That's kind of the details that'll be figured out at the 1.8 million number to accommodate the classrooms, and then they would share common spaces. And then the preschool, again, I'm going to recommend, from what I'm hearing, is that we're building a new facility for 350 students with the thought and the planning built into that we could easily add 5 classrooms to increase that capacity to 450 students. Does that sound like a reasonable?
I think that's the best compromise.
Okay.
Make it so.
Do
you need a vote or a motion or?
No, I mean, if that's the general consensus, and that's what the plan I'll put together.
We're not going to vote on the plan. You're just going to use this information tonight to develop the plan.
We're not taking a vote.
and you're gonna develop a plan, and then this plan's gonna, it's going to go to KDE for, and then we're gonna hash out these things with KDE, and then it's gonna come back to this group before they'll actually take a vote on it.
So
So we'll have the comments from KDE before this group has to vote on it.
That's correct. So my suggestion, and we talked briefly about this just before the meeting with Donald, was I will put together the plan as we described it, and in the correct format, which means it will look, this is your all's old plan, current plan, it will look like this, but based on your all's new priorities and other construction projects identified by KFIX. I'll send it to Donald. He can distribute it to the group, the LPC, see if anybody has any comments or questions. If there are no significant comments or questions, that is the plan that we will submit to KDE for their review and comment. They'll provide comments. The LPC will come back together in a meeting to review those comments and then vote on the plan at that point in time. And we'll have a public forum associated with that. So if there's any public input, we can gather that as well.
I just have a clarifying question about the building a new preschool. So you mentioned the sites, the land by Strode and then by Concrete. Are both of those sites large enough to accommodate what we're talking about? Okay.
One is 12 acres, one is 9.5 acres.
Okay.
And this group, the description that we'll put in here does not necessarily tie it to either one of those sites. That'll be ultimately the board's decision on where to construct a new preschool. This group is just advising the board that you should construct a new preschool.
And I might add that we also have 23.5 acres out US 60 also, which I'm not saying that's any better than the two other locations we talked about. There are 3 possibilities for construction sites for a preschool.
Right, right.
So I have a question.
Well,
For KDE purposes, are you doing or for the 1.8 million and the 3.4 for Phoenix?
no, we'll want to list it as the project that you're going to do to address Phoenix, because KDE will want to see, they don't want to review options. They want to see what this LPC is actually telling them that they're going to do and make comments on that. So I intend to include the one option for 1.8 million.
What?
That's a new wing with just 4 rooms?
4 classrooms, a resource rooms, the locally identified program allowance of 500 square feet, and then the administrative area of 750 square feet.
But that has no growth. I mean, that's just what, 40 kids?
Well, based on 15 students per classroom, which is the KDE, what KDE uses to calculate for alternative schools, that's 60 kids.
In addition to the resource room of 375 feet and a 500, the other allowance, what's it, I can't read it from here.
500. Oh, well, you've got the classrooms at $825 each for 3,300. The resource room at 375, the locally identified program LIPS allowance for 500, and then the administrative area of 750. And that's net program, not gross program. So obviously you got to account for restroom facilities. This would have their own restroom facilities, hallways, mechanical room. So there's some other spaces that are part of the gross calculation. This would be the net.
I would recommend that when you even look at this, that when it comes to design purposes, you look at a possible design possibility that additional classrooms could at some point come back and stick a couple more classrooms on, or it could be built upon also.
But you may also have the other 4 classrooms that currently we're looking at inside of GRC that can be added to that in some capacity.
And I guess I understand that there's a potential that you all are identifying a Phoenix Light program, which would be housed at RDC potentially,
That's a possibility.
which would pull some of these students over there, right?
None of these Phoenix, because these are only 5th grade through 12th grade, and primarily they're 7th through 12th grade.
Okay.
In this Phoenix Academy, so we're looking at something that's more of a K4.
Okay,
Or Phoenix
okay.
Light. We're calling it Phoenix Light. I don't know if that's the right thing to call it or not, but
The
Phoenix Little.
baby
Little.
Phoenix, I don't know what.
But those resource rooms, and also, I think that we need to consider that if you're talking about a structure that's on the site of the high school and actually connected to the high school, we're gonna have more of those kids are gonna be spending more time in the vocational part than they are currently. So that's gonna reduce those numbers of needing to be large numbers in those 4 classrooms, because being that close, we're gonna be much better able to utilize the vocational school for these kids. Every one of them. There are several of them there now that aren't getting to take advantage of it, that in a case like this, and starting this year with the transportation piece, we've got to see that they all have access to it.
I think that's a good comment about providing some language in there about the potential to add additional classrooms to that Phoenix Academy to just have the flexibility in the future to accommodate that population if it grows.
I'm sorry, this is Terry Curtis again. Can someone remind me how many children we have enrolled at the Phoenix Academy currently?
20.
It's low at this point because we're just starting off a school year, but I think we ended the year at 40 to 50.
I think the numbers that I saw in the SAR report were 46.
46, okay. We ended the year at 46. Those numbers fluctuate at various times.
Okay, my concern is only that we're looking at serving 46 children at the Phoenix Academy as a priority 1, when we're looking at over 300 children at the preschool as a priority 1 as well. To me, it seems like the preschool would need to be as a priority 1, since we would be serving a larger majority to the community at that point, and not at the Phoenix.
You're saying it should be the only number 1?
So the way I currently understand it to be, and the way I was going to draft it, both projects are under priority 1 listing. And that basically tells, what priority 1 means is that you're telling KDE that you intend to initiate those projects in the first biennium, the first 2 years of your 4-year program.
Both of them.
Both of them.
You can't go to any of the number 2s or 3s without doing those 2 first. You can't go
Which
to
I
any-
understand that, but it seems like when we have a crumbling preschool, we need to focus on that as opposed to the Phoenix Academy, which I understand also is in need of repair. But we have to look at what is most fiscally responsible for our community. And as a community member, I'm looking at this and thinking that we need to serve the 300 or 350 children to the best of our ability with a new facility as a priority 1, and maybe having the Phoenix Academy as a priority 2, because we are serving so many less children at that facility, and there is ability to expand at GRC at a lesser cost.
If you can afford both, why wouldn't you have them both number 1?
I understand that there's more children at the preschool, but I can't say that those 50 children are any less important than those 350 children. So I would be opposed to putting it as a number 2 myself.
I'm not saying that the children at Phoenix are not as important. I'm just thinking as a community member, if we can serve a vast majority as early intervention, it would serve our community better to put that as a priority 1.
I think this is right.
Can they not be
Sorry.
done at the same time?
Right, thank you. Yeah, I think the thought process is based on the current bonding capacity, and knowing that the bonding capacity is going to increase moving into the future, is that these 2 projects could happen simultaneously.
Compromise everyone can live with.
I have a question. Is that something that the board would decide which
Yes.
project of the number ones to start first, or do they have to both be started at exactly the same time? I
Nope.
think I remember the moderator who's helping us from KDE say that it's a good idea to have
That's you, Tim.
one number one. I can't remember. I was just wondering, is it up to the board which they choose to go for first?
This is Tim Eaton. I'm your facilitator. I work for KSBA. I'm not associated with KDE except by phone call or email. However, when you put, as Randy has so well, he's done a great job outlining all this tonight for you all. But when you put both items for consideration under one, they can be done simultaneously. The board would make the decision on what was first or what was second, but they're both number one priorities to be dealt with in the first biennium. So I don't see it as a big issue for having them both number one priorities.
I think the only real issue from the preschool's perspective of having them both be a number one priority, even though they have to be done in the first 2 years, is that if you start Phoenix before you start preschool and you complete that project and then you start us at the end, we're in an emergent situation. We have water coming into classrooms. We can't put furniture in classrooms because there's water coming in. The bathrooms are a massive safety issue, the lack of air conditioning, the window units that leak into the carpet. I mean, it's an emergent situation at preschool. So that's the only concern from my perspective at preschool.
Well, I think on this plan that Mr. Brookshire will be listing priority 1A and 1B. So if this group says for the preschool to be 1A and the Phoenix Academy be 1B, then you're still both priority ones, and maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, that works for me. Thank you.
Kara, speaking from the board's point of view, I would think that they will take that into consideration, all of the issues you've got going on.
Thank you, Ashley. You know it's just a little scary.
I know.
I just hope that we can see them both at the same time because they both have different issues. One, Kara's talking about safety, which is definitely an issue. And then the other, we're running out of time with them to get their credits to graduate and be productive citizens. So 2 different issues, but just as important.
Yep.
As well, bouncing off of what Christy said, as well as trying to expand it to bring in the elementary kids and make it a larger program.
That would have to be decided later.
Well, those were the two biggest things to kind of hash through, and I feel like I've got clear direction on both. And my task now will be to put that in a KDE format that they will expect to see that in and get it distributed to Donald, who will distribute it to the rest of the LPC, and then gather feedback before we send it to KDE for their comments. So unless there's any other questions, I think I've got the direction I need. What's left on your
Go
agenda?
forth and do good.
Adjourn? Is that it?
May peace be with you.
Go forth and do good.
May the 4th be.
May the force be with you.
Okay, well, I think that concludes my portion. I think the only other thing left to do is to adjourn, and I think that would be Ashley's responsibility, right?
Yep.
She follows.
Sorry, I'm
She already adjourned.
Yeah, I adjourned on my own. We did not need to set another meeting time?
I would
Not at
not,
this point.
because it's.
I just
it's-
seen where it said next steps on the agenda, so I didn't know.
Well, let me say something real quick. This is your facilitator again. Once this is sent to KDE, there is no way that we could set a meeting time because sometimes it's 6 weeks before you'll see it, or it's 2 months. So we're kind of at their mercy. And I will call and prompt the facilitator up there to and remind him that we have an August deadline and that we need him to review that as much as possible. That's part of my job. So we will do it that way. And once we get a feel for when we are going to be able to get it back, we'll set the meeting date, if that's okay.
Okay, I was just going by the agenda.
Okay.
If not, then we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that
Motion
motion.
to adjourn.
The motion to adjourn.
I don't know who said that.
There was 3 motions to adjourn,
Karen,
so
Christie, and Donna.
we'll go with, okay, we'll go Christie. Who wants the second?
Second.
No, nobody will.
Somebody did.
I heard Snail, I think.
Somebody else.
Snail.
Did I hear Mr. Snail?
Yeah, he's got his hearing.
Yes, I think it was Snail. So motion by Christie Bush, second by Snail. Got it.
Mr. Snail.
All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Did somebody really say aye?
I think Dustin was voting in the
Yeah.
affirmative.
Okay. All right, then we're adjourned at
What time?
He doesn't
7:10.
care enough.
7:10?
Dustin had a delayed